Welcome to the Navik Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Navik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.navik.co. This episode is brought to you by Lakestar, one of the leading European venture capital firms. Lakestar's mission is to find, fund, and grow disruptive businesses that are enabled by technology and founded by exceptional entrepreneurs in Europe and beyond. Founded by Klaus Ammels, the team's early investments include Skype, Spotify, Facebook, and Airbnb, and since raising its first fund in 2012, Lakestar now manages an aggregated volume of over 2.8 billion euros across their early and growth stage funds. The team actively advises and supports portfolio companies in marketing, recruitment, technology, product development, and regulatory insight, accompanying founders from seed to early stage, growth stage, or exit. Lakestar's games and media team has made 18 investments, including 1047 Games, Zebedee, Modulate, and Trace. If you're interested in learning more or getting in contact with the Lakestar team, simply go to lakestar.com or check out the details in the show notes. And with that, let's jump into the episode.
All right, everyone, welcome to another Navik Roundtable. I'm your host, Devin Becker, and with me, I have some great panelists as always. We got Mario, Tammy, and Manu here. How you guys doing today?
Hello, Devin. Good.
Doing great.
Back from Gamescom week, and work has hit like a tsunami. So
it also feels like everyone was on like summer, or like at least the European side, summer vacation, and people are starting to come back. So news are starting to pick up after Gamescom for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. We're gonna be heading into fall as well, of course, at some point, and then stuff for winter. I'm sure we'll be ramping up. But we have a lot of topics to cover today. A lot of stuff, as you said, the news ramping up. We have a lot of stuff, like as you mentioned, Gamescom highlights. We've got some small amount of news around Supercell, following up on a previous topic there. Epic with some revenue changes. Sony with a little bit of news on their side. Sandsoft with a new COO, and Embracer with some stock issues, I guess. But let's just dive into the Supercell stuff real quick.
So I wanted to do a quick update on Supercell Floodrush, one of the games that they were running closed beta on earlier in the summer. So we talked about it back in an episode in June, just when they hit with two betas, Floodrush and Squad Busters. As a reminder, both games being Battle Royale, kind of build your party during the match, trying to reach the final, kind of very, very much Battle Royale-esque, both of them. And this week, they announced that they were canceling Floodrush in a very Supercell type way of celebrating killing games. Some of the comments that they made were, they identified several issues and pretty much they called out everything: gameplay mechanics, controls, character dynamics, art direction. The feedback across the board seemed to basically say, that it was not worth for them continuing developing the game to really meet the Supercell standard, right? So it's a very different standard than a lot of games. Like, they are in this constant quest for finding hit games. So, it was not hitting that bar, and they even called it out in their announcement that they would need to make huge and extensive changes to the point that it would be completely different game, which at that point it means, they're better off starting a new game. So I do want to call out that this is another example of Supercell celebrating something that a lot of teams, and I've been on this end of the spectrum, where it's very hard to kill games, cancel games, however you call it, and instead they're trying to celebrate the fact of not making it feel like a bad thing to cancel a game, but really take the learnings from there. They even call it out in their post that ideas and insights gathered while developing Floodrush can in many forms be applied to other projects. And they didn't call out any specific games, but even thinking about like Squad Busters, that it's still in development, is probably one of the games that will benefit from the learnings. And just to kind of close off, as a reminder, I think at this point we have 2 games in active dev from Supercell. We have Squad Busters and we have Clash Mini, the auto battler kind of auto chess type game that's been in soft launch since November 2021. I was looking at their data in data.ai, and it sounds like they might be gearing up to either gather some more learnings or launch the game, because they did a big push in July as well, opening up in the UK. And they got very good traction there, over close to 200k downloads. It seems to be holding pretty decent DAU, but still revenue seems to be flattening. So we'll see where they take Clash Mini, but Supercell comes with a reminder that it's always okay to cancel games.
Well, I don't think we'll see them do that strategy of just kind of dumping a game out there again. That seemed to be kind of the experiment with this that also didn't seem to get the traction, as opposed to their 2 games, as you mentioned, kind of soft launch for a while here. Probably much more likely to make it out. But I don't imagine we'll see anyone like just trying to copy Floodrush either. So it's probably just kind of dead in the water.
Yeah, I remember when we first talked about both of these games, I think it was with Tammy itself, and we were kind of saying that, Squad Busters is basically the same game as Floodrush, just that Squad Busters has the, the various Supercell IPs, and Floodrush is a new IP. We recently released a, strategy genre report, and in that we kind of Jordan, who's a consulting partner at Navik, he kind of did a little piece on what has various Supercell's games missing more recently, and why, trying to like just explore like a slightly new theory for why they're canceling so many of their soft launches. And it's maybe like not the newest insight, because probably everyone in the industry feels this, but the core insight was that Supercell basically, or like a lot of their games that have gotten cancelled, have just kind of missed the essence of the genre that they are trying to redefine in a way. And so for Floodrush specifically, it's kind of like Brawl Stars meets agar.io in a way, and but what kind of makes Brawl Stars great is the aiming and timing of your attacks and movements and such. That's a hugely important skill. And just the hand-eye coordination and deep understanding of the brawler's strengths and stuff, that kind of gives you an edge in the battle. But in agar.io, you're like this amorphous blob, and it grows larger by eating smaller blobs. But then a very, very key feature in that game is the splitting or merging of your blob, and that's that kind of creates like this risk reward decision in the gameplay, which doesn't really exist in Floodrush or even Squad Busters for that matter. So we kind of concluded in our Floodrush / Squad Busters analysis that basically the game missed the essence of both these Brawl Stars and agar.io. It just didn't kind of come together. And I don't know, at least for us, the writing was a little bit on the wall in that report itself, that Floodrush is probably going to get cancelled. And yeah, I think like a week later it was announced. And maybe they learn from it and kind of reinvest into Squad Busters. But I think the one sentence that they made at the start of their blog post, they basically said, we needed to make extensive changes to the point that it would transform Floodrush into something too distant from the initial vision. And if both Squad Busters and this one are so similar in terms of gameplay, it's like would Squadbusters also need to move like very far away from its initial vision, so yeah, maybe Squadbusters has the same fate, but yeah, more bullish on Clash Mini.
Yeah, and I think that there were like some key distinctions between Floodrush and Squadbusters, where I think that potentially Squadbusters might have a better shot at surviving. The other thing that as you were talking that really stands out to me is that generally speaking, what is Supercell trying to do is what you were saying, reinvent, reimagine core genres and bring them to broader audiences. One of the things that I feel like they're really good at is creating gorgeous worlds in art, just amazing art for the mobile form factor. And some of the games like Floodrush and even Everdale have been trying to challenge that established look and feel from Supercell. That doesn't seem to land as well either. So I think that there's a lot of things that we're going into Floodrush not having the shot at really being a Supercell hit.
I think Supercell does best when they're making small tweaks to already established genres. Like you said, Tammy, like bringing it to like a much bigger audience. I just hope they're not dissuaded by all of the recent game closures. Like, we had Rush Wars, Heyday Pop, Clash Quest, Everdale. Like, there's really no shortage of closures, and Everdale in particular was kind of a bit of a head scratcher because I thought they could, maybe redefine the town building sim genre there, which has gotten quite stale. But I'd rather see them create projects and keep iterating until something sticks and they can have a hit than really not try to be innovative at all.
I would say that I think saying that Supercell does best when they make small tweaks to existing genres is probably a big understatement. I think it's like a little bit on the other end of the spectrum where Supercell basically redefines a genre by simplifying. Like Clash Mini, for example, it really just takes the essence of what makes an auto battler interesting. Given that auto battlers were kind of created for the Dota community first and not for a mobile experience, and it just takes what's interesting in that auto battle experience, makes it mobile first, and therefore increases accessibility and such. So it's some pretty those simplification decisions are definitely like one of the hardest decisions I think in game design, just given like you have such a strong inspiration that will keep clouding your decision making, design decision making. So yeah, very, very hard decisions, and therefore people who are able to pull it off can see like very good success, like Supercell. So
well, it sounded like based off of what you said about the Agar.io and the way Floodrush turned out, maybe they oversimplified, like overcorrected a bit into that range.
Clash Mini is actually it does do a good job of the simplification, but on Floodrush, I feel they just missed features entirely. Like they just missed the things that make Brawl Stars and Agar.io great. And I'm not sure why. But
yeah. Well, the nice thing is, of course, they're going to be able to turn those learnings into things that will contribute to Squadbusters, I imagine. Probably not a huge amount, right? Because they were already had some key differences, but I think we'll see potentially some changes down the road to that game, and hopefully a release. They definitely put their stuff at soft launch for quite a while, so I'm looking forward to at least seeing Clash Mini come out at this point, just because it's been a long time. It's been kind of dwindling away, but they've been improving on it, right? Iterating on it, and so I don't think that's going anywhere other than global at some point here, hopefully. But speaking of announcements, a lot of stuff coming out of Gamescom that you were just at, Manu.
Yep. I mean, to be fair, I was basically just stuck in a lot of meetings during my time at Gamescom, and whatever time I did kind of get to see the show floors and stuff, I did visit. But yeah, I mean, thank goodness for sources like IGN and stuff who basically kind of keep a tab on all of this. But yeah, a lot of interesting games got announced. So I'll just kind of go through this in rapid fire, and maybe a few comments here and there. So probably my favorite one was Black Myth Wukong. We got to see like some gameplay on that. It's another like Souls like game that's been in development for some time now, but it is looking really 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 good. And it's currently sitting at number 13 on Steam's top wish listed games. But beyond that, there were like a lot of other interesting games also kind of announced. One was Payday, not announced, but just kind of brought up. But Payday 3, which is also sitting at number 6 on Steam's top wish listed games. So yeah, probably maybe a good sign for Embracer a little bit. Stalker 2 was sitting at number 9. Lies of P, and it's another Souls like. I never knew about this game before, but it's based on Pinocchio and also looking really, really good. Pinocchio, you know, Pinocchio themed Souls like, which, well, yeah, kind of like surprised me. What did like surprise me even more though was, even Mortal Kombat 1, showcase like more gameplay and such at Gamescom, but for whatever reason, this seems to be like maybe the best, at least to me, like just the best Mortal Kombat until now. Maybe MK11 is better, but this one did seem really good. But it is sitting like pretty low on the Steam wishlist charts at like number 60. But yeah, I mean the single player mode looked really really good. And yeah, I'm just kind of surprised why it's like so low, at least on the wishlist charts. Other than that, Homeworld. So yeah, this is kind of big news, but Homeworld is coming back after 20 years with Homeworld 3. And the apart from like the kind of the core Homeworld experience that they'll be refining and upgrading, they have like this one roguelike inspired RTS mode, and that's what at least the developers are pretty excited about and marketing quite a bit. One thing I'm pretty curious to see, like after 20 years, Homeworld coming back, will Homeworld also kind of have like a Baldur's Gate moment with this launch? And it'll again be pretty interesting to see. Again, yeah, Homeworld potentially good news for Embracer, given everything that's happened with them.
If Homeworld has a moment like that, if it's a moment of reigniting the RTS genre, because that's also one that's been kind of quite stale in the last few years. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get that big moment. I think it can also reignite a little bit of the RTS genre.
Yep. Totally fair point. Yep. And then like more on the, I guess, cross-platform mobile side of things. One super interesting project, which is maybe like competing with Black Myth for my favorite position, is NetEase's project Mugen. So this one, I think, this one was freshly announced at Gamescom, and imagine like the cyberpunk theming meets Genshin Impact open world action RPG experience meets Spider-Man movement and like kind of swinging around the city. So yeah, the way they define it is, or the way they describe the game is an urban open world game. And its core inspirations, like I mentioned, their movements are heavily inspired, character movements heavily inspired by Spider-Man, combat and environments and such heavily inspired by Genshin Impact, graphical fidelity and production quality, and themes is like heavily inspired by cyberpunk. The one why I found this like super interesting is because when Tower of Fantasy was announced, I personally felt it was kind of like DOA, because it just looked so similar to Genshin Impact, and why there was no clear reason for me to switch, but just kind of just given this more like cyberpunk, cyberpunk theming, and you're kind of in a real city and moving around, and it's so familiar in terms of like our own daily lives. It feels like very very strongly differentiated to Genshin Impact's experience, and that kind of makes me pretty bullish on this game. The thing that might like temper my bullishness is that, whether NetEase can really deliver on, gacha based RPG monetization systems. I don't think they have. I might be wrong here. I don't know. I don't think they have like a major track record, like a proven track record with those kind of systems. The only game I was able to find that has like some hints of it is maybe Onmyoji, which is an action RPG kind of similar to Honkai Impact. But yeah, I think this is probably like a big unknown, and maybe I'm wrong and I'm missing some games of NetEase that actually do gacha based RPG monetization. But I think that'll be a pretty big unknown, or a pretty big thing that they need to prove out. But yeah, finally, I guess in terms of marketing, we'll see it. They're just going to go pretty all out on this, when it is ready, similar to like Genshin, and now Honkai Star Rail also did, and it'll just be pretty heavy on the brand marketing efforts. Huge billboards, buses with like posters of this game on it and whatnot. So should be pretty crazy.
Yeah, as you were describing it, I was googling some images of Project Mugen, and it definitely stands out compared to Honkai and Genshin Impact. So I think if it has, as you said, if they execute on the gacha based mechanics in that depth, I think it has a very strong shot at, if nothing else, cannibalizing a little bit from Genshin. I think that Honkai has already cannibalized a little bit from Genshin anyway. So, I think at worst, if they executed well, they can cannibalize into that market. At best, it can expand the market and just the reach of these types of games globally.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Genshin Impact definitely needs to be ready for potential impact, and so let's see what happens. And then another mobile one, probably the last one. So Assassins. So Ubisoft also kind of put out their first gameplay videos of Assassin's Creed Jade. They've dropped the code name from it, so now we have the official name. To be honest, I was a little bit underwhelmed with the production quality of this. It really looked like I mean, with experiences like Genshin Impact and Project Mugen kind of staring me in the face and telling me that they're going to be available soon. This game looked like something that was built like 5-7 years back, and I was really, for this IP, Assassin's Creed, I was really expecting more. It might be an open world experience. Not fully sure, but IGN also kind of did like an interview with someone important from that game team, and one red flag that kind of popped up was when IGN asked him, like, what's the monetization plan for this? Is it going to be free to play or not? He did say yes, it is going to be free to play, but in terms of how exactly that works, like he didn't even say like we're thinking about it and we can't reveal it, but he said, nah, we're just focused on gameplay right now, we'll figure out the monetization later. And that felt like, for a free to play game, that felt like at least an orange flag for me. So yeah, a little bit disappointed with the production quality. Big questions on the monetization strategy with Assassin's Creed Jade. But yeah, I mean, the gameplay did look good for an Assassin's Creed game, and I think they should be able to deliver on just like the core Assassin's Creed experience and kind of keep that core fan base pretty happy.
I mean, I'm really excited about Heart of Chernobyl. GSC is kind of one of my favorite underground developers. I was a huge Shadow of Chernobyl fan. That was one of the first games I ever played on Steam back in 2007. And I'm just really happy that they're going with Unreal Engine 5 rather than their in-house engine that was used for previous Stalker titles. Those games have incredible gameplay. The survival horror elements are, amazing, but the technical glitches were enough. Like, they were beyond kind of like Bethesda level. And I'm just really excited to see more studios use Unreal Engine. CD Projekt also comes to mind. They're switching to that from Red Engine. And I'm also happy to see the developers abandon NFTs. There was a huge uproar in the community about NFTs being integrated into a stalker game, and I feel like that's just an instance of the developer not knowing their fan base. Most stalker fans are not like the same crossover as like NFT type gamers, and it's good to see a developer listening to their community.
Yeah, I was following the Gamescom news, and what was also interesting to see was I think it was from Mobile Gamer. Neil posted some photos of the booths and just seeing very like mobile centric, like huge booths in a time where we feel like we're squeezing on mobile and like things are tight on mobile, and seeing just anywhere from like Marvel Snap to Netflix to Hoyoverse. It's a huge global developer, but just seeing like these huge fancy booths back on the floors, and just like the photos of that, like that was pretty crazy to see, especially the Netflix one. I think like that one's like, you just like, it feels out of place.
I was there. I did see the Netflix one with like the upside down those creatures kind of taking over the buildings and such. Hoyoverse is actually, even last year's Gamescom, Hoyoverse had a huge booth, and I guess they can kind of afford to do it now. The one that did surprise me was just like a Marvel Snap booth. So that was kind of huge, and it was also like pretty empty actually, like no, at least on the first day when I was there. Maybe it filled up later, but that one just surprised me, like a booth just dedicated to this one game. But
because you're right. Like Hoyoverse and Netflix, it feels out of place, just like more of like out of context, like the shifting the mentality.
I think they had they were serving pizza and stuff inside that booth, so you could like get into a line and get your pizza slice and then walk out.
that's the way to do it. But they're building a huge like publishing publishing portfolio, so it makes sense to have kind of like the big booth presence. But Marvel Snap, single game, mobile game, recently gone across platform, huge booth. That's pretty crazy to see.
Yeah, I guess for Netflix, when you don't have like the hard hitting game portfolio, then need to give out the pizza. So anyway,
I guess at that point they're just trying to get attention for that shift. Just trying to make sure people are aware that they're moving into that space pretty heavily, and like that's like a signal flare basically at that point, rather than anything useful. Yeah. And of course, people are going to get the free pizza, right? Take it, especially when I imagine food might be kind of expensive there. So it's probably a smart tactic on their part. Although the Marvel Snap one does sound a little questionable for a game that's like, if you haven't heard of it, you're probably not interested, kind of thing. So, but Sony actually had a couple interesting announcements that were a little off our expectations.
Yeah, so about a week ago, Sony made a very surprising announcement to purchase Audeze, who is a headphone maker popular among audiophiles for their unique driver technology. And I think this just came out of left field because there are so many other kind of gaming first peripheral companies, like Turtle Beach, for example, comes to mind, that I thought would be purchased first by like a Sony or a Microsoft. But in recent months, Audeze has focused on their gaming headphone lineup, including the wireless Maxwell line for PS5 and Xbox Series X. They retail for $300, and the audiophile wired gaming headset, the LCD GX, goes for $900, which is like twice the cost of a discless PS5. So I found the acquisition to be a head scratcher because it's clear Sony wants to boost their hardware lineup, as shown by the launch of PSVR 2 and the Pulse 3D wireless cans that came out a few months ago. But those are for a much lower price point at $100. And, someone would think that there were a lot better acquisition targets available to Sony for their SIE division. One theory I have is that a PS5 Pro bundle is in the works. So PS5 Pro itself is still in rumor mode, but there are some rumblings that it could be released for holiday 2023. And I think there's probably room for a bundle around $1,000 with like a discless version of the PS5 Pro, as well as a PlayStation branded Maxwell headset, and a few new games like Armored Core 6, Baldur's Gate 3, Payday 3. But yeah, I think it's kind of just a price differentiation strategy that Sony is experimenting with. And speaking on price, the news broke today that PlayStation's subscription service would be increasing their annual price. The essential plan is going from $60 to $80. The extra plan is going from $100 to $135, and the premium plan is going from $120 to $160. So this one is even more confusing to me because this is happening after Sony failed to convince any regulator to have Microsoft abandon the Activision acquisition. And Microsoft's catalog is pretty much doubling in the coming months, whereas Sony, like, sure, they've acquired Bungie and a handful of other indie studios, but I feel like they're not in the position to increase their offering like this fast and that dramatically. 60 to 80 is like a 30% increase. I'm wondering what you guys think about either announcement.
Yeah, at least on the hardware part of it, Audeze's. I think I didn't have exactly the same theory as yours in terms of the bundle, but I mean that makes complete sense. But yeah, I guess for me it was just it kind of made sense in terms of Sony essentially trying to expand its various customer touch points by opening up potential new product lines that just kind of amplifies its core offering, and headphones is like pretty core to the gaming experience, so why not kind of make it a Sony one instead. So but yeah, I mean I think the bundle theory also makes sense. On the price increases, I don't know, I would need to think about that. But I don't know, maybe Tammy has some thoughts.
It's pretty fresh news, so I'm still kind of it's a little bit of a head scratcher on what is the driving force here for Sony specifically. That's where I'm at right now. It's as of the recent news for sure.
Was it just like a straight price increase with no announcements of why, or like additional feature sets or content and such? Was it just a plain we're just raising the prices? Or
yeah, the news broke like 20 minutes before our recording, so I couldn't dig into it a ton. But even if there are new offerings within the bundles, it just strikes me as weird timing, given Activision's about to close.
Maybe something to dig into next week.
Yeah, I don't think it was even really like an official announcement from Sony, right? It was more of like a leak kind of announcement, and so maybe there's like a missing piece to it, perhaps. I guess we'll see. But it does seem like a bit of a steep, because I mean, we know like a lot of streaming services, for example, are like increasing their prices pretty dramatically. So like everyone's kind of across the board, but for Sony to not have much new to offer with that seems like, yeah, maybe the other shoe would drop at some point here, hopefully, because otherwise it seems like they're kind of asking a lot for what they're really giving at this point, especially they're just making Microsoft look good in that respect, After I think because Microsoft also recently changed their subscription service around the Xbox Gold and stuff, right?
Yeah, Gold I think is no longer like included with the bundle. But yeah, I feel like, I guess my last thought on this is I feel like Sony is trying to have it both ways. Like a printer company sells printers at a loss, but then sells the ink at like a premium, and like, okay, Sony's selling the consoles at like a slight loss, but now it's selling the accessories at a premium. It's selling the software offering at a premium. Like, it feels like they're trying to extract too much, I think, from their user base at the present, without improving the offering enough to substantiate that.
Especially since the exclusivity wars are kind of like somewhat over, right, outside of the acquisition game. So it does seem like Sony is going to be like in a little bit of trouble there without like those kind of exclusives to say like, this is why you got to stay over here, right? So I guess we'll see, like, as things shape towards winter, see if the battle's brewing between those two, if anyone has yet to choose a side because they were like waiting on PS5 stock or something back in the day. But we'll see. Speaking of revenue, though, Epic continuing to play off strengths, doing some tweaks to their revenue program.
Yeah, can keep this one pretty quick. So Epic recently, or the Epic Game Stores, kind of announced a new revenue boost system. I believe it's called First Run. And essentially the offer is, people or developers who launch their games exclusively on the Epic Game Store will get 100% of the first 6 months of revenue. And then after that, it switches to the 88-12%. So, I mean, of course, the why is clear, just so that Epic does get just makes it more and more attractive for developers to kind of go exclusive on the store, and therefore Epic increasing its user base like that. But yeah, it's an interesting. I guess the question to ask is, will it really work in terms of attracting the developers? It's definitely an interesting move. The value proposition is super clear. But when I thought about it, I guess in my eyes, it's for like really big publishers who kind of have high confidence that, their games are going to be a success. The biggest risk to them kind of pursuing this is basically kind of pissing off their player base that likes to stay on Steam, or like who are kind of active on Steam. And, that is definitely the bigger chunk of the player base. Like that I can, already kind of see those players just saying, why aren't you just making it available on Steam right now? And that kind of causing uproar and things like that. But yeah, I think like going fully exclusive on the Epic Game Store, if that point is not a risk, going fully exclusive on the Epic Game Store for the first 6 months for games that can keep the hype going until the Steam release, I guess it's not really a risk, but it just also kind of feels weird. It would just be interesting to see that, whether the best developers also just kind of more philosophically agree with the whole exclusive strategy. I mean, most recently, or not most recently, but since Baldur's Gate is very much in the conversation these days, the founder of Larian Studios, Sven Vinke, in a 2018 interview, he said that he's not into like doing exclusive. He wants to make his game available everywhere, as soon as it's ready. And for that reason, Baldur's Gate 3 is still not available on the Epic Game Store. That's like so it'll just be interesting to see whether the really big developers more philosophically also kind of agree with this. But yeah, the biggest risk is just pissing off your player base that lives on Steam. I guess the place where it maybe gets a little bit more risky are maybe for developers who are just kind of flying blind a little bit in terms of like potential, launch performance. As soon as you do something on, you want to when you launch, you basically want to make the most of the hype that would be kind of attached with that launch. But if you go live on Epic Game Store exclusive, which definitely has like a lower potential buyer base than Steam, then yeah, word gets out, and by the time you release on Steam, you've just lost that upside really. So yeah. But yeah, maybe they end up just deciding, well, I mean, a 12% hit, for 6 months, maybe the catching the hype is actually just worth kind of taking that hit, and therefore the first run program doesn't really see any success. But yeah, I guess yeah, for me, in general, the whole revenue, this whole first run idea, it's a great idea, and it's definitely it's something. It's basically Epic kind of needs to come up with these ideas to kind of get a leg up on Steam eventually in the long term. Um, but yeah, the reality also is, in 2022, Epic Game Store, its peak DAU was at around 35 million. Steam's peak concurrence in Jan 2023. So this is DAU versus concurrence. Steam's peak concurrence for 35 million in Jan 2023. So like that just, I mean, Steam just has such a huge scale advantage, and still, but EGS is also definitely catching up. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think in terms of a good strategy for developers over here?
Yeah, I mean, my one sentence thought is if it didn't make sense for a developer to go to Epic for a 12% cut, they're still not going to do it for 0%. They value engagement. Those sorts of developers value engagement more so than preserving their margin.
I think it seems like an obvious thing for Web3 games to choose, though, considering they can't go over to Steam anyways, right? Like, that's kind of an easy win. I mean, I thought they were super concerned about that anyways, but it seems like an easy choice there. But it is interesting, like, looking at the sources of revenue for both companies in the sense that, like, Valve is primarily focused on a lot of the Steam-oriented stuff, not making games so much, maybe updating them occasionally, things like that. Whereas Epic, while they've got games like Fortnite and things like that, they also technically are making money off of games that are on Steam in the terms of Unreal Engine, which you mentioned earlier, Mario. So there is a revenue source even coming in a way through the Steam platform. So a game that's in the Unreal Engine is doing well on Steam, that also benefits them as a company. So like they're not in the worst position to try and like continue to edge like margin, like people away from Steam. But as you said, like it's not a huge nudge for people that actually care that much, and it's more just like people that are like willing to take the risk anyways are just going to benefit probably. Like I don't think it's going to change who does it. It's just going to be like, hey, some people will benefit a little bit more and be a little more excited about an Epic Store launch. But I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you all can remember like Steam back in the day just being basically a way to download Half-Life 2. So you never know, like this stuff comes a long way. But as you said, a lot of traction for Steam. Although you got to keep in mind those concurrents probably don't like necessarily mean they were playing a game. It just, they have Steam open, but who doesn't just leave it open, right? Like unless you're trying to like stop it from downloading things. So I don't think people are doing that quite the same with Epic Store yet. So
the same point just exists for DAU also, right? Like just a login to the Epic Game Store would be counted as a DAU, but
no, what I was going to say from like the developer point of view, there's this piece of, I feel like a lot of teams right now are just really trying to figure out creative strategies for expanding their distribution, which means that, news like this of, hey, Epic is going to give higher rev share, like 90-10. If you go exclusively, I think for some teams it's worth the shot, because if it's less competitive, even if the audience itself is smaller, like your TAM is smaller going on Epic first, if the chance of reaching more of that audience is higher, and on top of that getting a higher rev share off of that, I think for some teams it's going to be worth experimenting and seeing if they can actually, have a better outcome. Because ultimately, Steam is super competitive. It takes a lot at this point to really gather the hype on Steam and really get your wish list counts up, and it takes a lot of effort from teams as well. So I think there's a pros and cons that each team has to evaluate based on their own capabilities and confidence on whether they could even get the visibility on Steam, even when they're a big game or a big team, versus taking a shot at Epic Games and see if they can find early success there instead.
I guess what you're trying to say is like if the revenue volume, because there's more, because the user base on the Epic Game Store is more of a blue ocean to capture, just given like the game count available.
Yeah, if you can capture more of their smaller audience, like it's I think it is like the equation, right, how elastic is that equation in terms of them being able to move the needle on conversions, being with a smaller audience versus a more competitive, bigger audience?
But yeah, I guess even even in that case, they'll ultimately the Excel sheet that is created internally will essentially need to have a case too, which is, well, okay, what if we did go with the 12% cut for the 6 months, but there's this potential huge Steam audience also, and put like a super low conversion on that, worst case scenario, what would that kind of result in? But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting idea for sure.
Definitely starting to feel like a iOS versus Android sort of thing, right? Where so it might be where some genres do better on one or the other, whereas like you see on iOS, when a lot of times when you look at the revenue, it's like there's maybe less people playing on iOS, but bigger spenders, and then maybe the inverse for that for Android, depending on the game and the genre, right, and the demographics and all that. But I don't know if we're really quite there yet in terms of like both of them being big enough to really kind of compete in that way, but it is starting to trend that way. But it's nice to have, right? Like to have the choice there, so it's not a monopoly. As much as I think we all enjoy using Steam, it's nice to actually have someone nudging them continually to improve things. So,
Yep.
Speaking of a company needing to improve, Embracer stock problems.
Yeah, so I think it's no surprise to anyone, but Embracer Group just continues to struggle after each and every earnings report that they release. 3 months ago, they were down 40% on the news of the loss of the transformative partnership that we now know was Savvy Games Group. And then after earnings got hit again. And then now with their fiscal year 2024 Q1 earnings that came out a couple weeks ago, the stock was down again 16% on the week, and down a lot after the earnings immediately as well. And I think people have just soured on Embracer's prospects given the bloat that's present at the company. CEO Lars Wingfors keeps referencing worsening economic conditions and a new market reality for why things have gone so poorly. But when you think about it, like we have near record low unemployment, we have pretty good global growth, it calls into question what Embracer's prospects are if we actually do enter a recession, which is why I think the company has kind of turned into like a value trap. They're still projecting like 10 billion kroner in earnings for the full year, and when you look at it like on a valuation basis, it's like 6 times their earnings is the company's enterprise value. So it's very, very cheap on a valuation basis. But they just have 17,000 employees, over 130 studios, and when you look at their revenue per head count, it is significantly lower than like an EA or a Take-Two. And Embracer just bought for the last few years. In 2022, they spent over $1 billion making 20 acquisitions. Before that, they spent over $3 billion in 2021 alone on a single acquisition, Asmodee, which is a board game company. And yes, they wanted to create tangential properties to the board games via gaming IP, but now with projects being axed and canceled in studios like Campfire Cabal being closed, I don't think that's going to happen. Like titles like Payday 3, Space Marine 2, Remnant 2, those are still going to be released, but the ambition part of game development for Embracer has been scaled back significantly. And it just calls into question all of this IP they have, around all these game properties, around even Lord of the Rings. Will they be able to successfully monetize it if they aren't willing to pour the dollars into sales and marketing and research and development?
I guess there's a little bit more. Given all the restructuring, etc., that's happening, hopefully it kind of results in being able to unlock those eventual marketing budgets for them so that they could reinvest. Because we at the top of the show, we also kind of went through some of the announcements at Gamescom, and yeah, there do seem to be like a few games that that are definitely quite interesting, getting some good early traction, and can all be attributed back to Embracer. But yeah, I mean, yeah, this $2 billion deal, yeah, like you said, it was really a transformative, could have been a transformative one for them. 2 billion. So yeah, pretty big loss.
Yeah, I think ultimately Payday 3 is more critical to Embracer than something like Starfield is for Microsoft. It's kind of weird that a company with 130 studios and 17,000 employees has a lot riding on like just a handful of titles. But that's just the reality of it. Like they've acquired studios and headcount, but they've done little to actually acquire useful assets. And it's just all coming to bear right now.
Yep. Yeah, I guess that there's definitely like just something to say about Pareto's principle in game seeing success. The thing about it being a hits driven business, there's definitely like some truth to it. But yeah, I think the way you put it, like in terms of acquiring useful assets, that's a very different question than just acquiring a large number of assets.
Yeah, at 0% interest rates, which is now very different.
Let's hope for everyone's sake that these games that they're riding on do well, because obviously if that doesn't happen, right, not only does it hurt those games, but it sounds like it might hurt like more the broader portfolio they have in terms of them being forced to look at those assets more hard, like in terms of, we've got to cut these, we've got to cut that down. We can't, like the number of risks they could take diminishes as some of those fail, right? And obviously Payday 3 is a big gamble, I think, for that company as well, just because like they wrote like everything off of Payday 2, like they had to pretty much cancel their other projects. So it's a rough spot to be in with a lot of games riding on sequels now in general. Like a lot of the ones even you mentioned coming out of Gamescom and stuff, a lot of sequels kind of being the key to these games, where no one's really tried to launch a lot of new IP outside of maybe the Pinocchio one, if you want to count that. So it'll be interesting to see. But we did have an interesting changeover in leadership that I think is kind of interesting in relation, which is around Sandsoft getting a new COO.
So last week, or I think earlier this week, Sandsoft announced a new COO, Pascal Batalla, from formerly coming from Social Point. So I thought it would be interesting to dive a little bit into what Sandsoft is doing, what their strategy is, and what their long-term vision is. Sandsoft is, kind of as a quick overview, is another Saudi Arabia publisher making a big push to be a global player. So we've talked already in the podcast about Savvy Games, which is more of a holding company. So there's like some differences between how Savvy Games and Sandsoft are even funded in approaching game development. But in general, they're both kind of as part of this Saudi Arabia Vision 2030 that they call it, whereas they're, as a whole country, they're dedicated to the country's socioeconomic diversification, and they really want to find kind of growth across all industries and outside of oil. So Sandsoft specifically is not funded publicly. They're funded by a Saudi-based family, which in some interviews the current CEO has called them fully supportive and thinking about the long-term vision of their investments. So we don't have precise figures on how much and how deep their pockets go, but it's a very kind of interesting case of just being privately funded. They started as a publisher focused on bringing games from Western markets to the MENA region, specializing in localization, culturalization, marketing, customer support. But as of 2021, they brought in a new CEO, David Fernandez. He was formerly at King.com. And with him joining, they kind of gone to this more global strategy, which I think it's interesting because it's a very, what they're executing is interesting, and it's they're making some good bets, but it feels like very building bottoms up. By starting with experimenting with first party games. They have a studio in Riyadh, and they're trying to open a studio in the US. It looks like it's going to be Barcelona. They were kind of shooting wherever they can find talent, but based on recent COO joining, it seems like they've settled in Barcelona. Probably they want to open up in Japan, Korea, or China, and then open in the US. Like they want one big new region every year. They've announced that they're publishing or co-publishing with Jam City the latest game that they've launched, DC Heroes and Villains. So that's focused on publishing it in the MENA region. And they've done some small investments around like the $3 million mark in some European teams, Tiny Digital Factory being the latest one. So there's definitely, they have kind of like these three pillars of global footprint, publishing, investments. And, they're all interesting on their own. What really stood out to me is, their vision is like in 5 years, they want to be, basically at the same size and level as EA, Activision, Tencent, and NetEase. And, the strategy that they're following doesn't quite line up with kind of that grand vision. Like it's kind of like a mishmash of trying small to medium moves with a vision that's like an extra large. And it really contrasts with their, the other team that I was talking about, the other company, Savvy, where, they have a similar vision in terms of goals. And, they went in and bought Scopely, which, puts them at kind of an advantage there. And, they made investments in tons of huge companies from like Nintendo to EA, I think, to a bunch of others. So I thought it was like, it's just like a very interesting case of having like a very big goal and target, but what they're executing today, it's not a 5-year thing, right? It would be a much longer time horizon. So I wanted to see if you guys had any takes or thoughts on overall, Sandsoft, their strategy and their recent announcements.
Yeah, I think like, you have all of these publishers and developers chasing mobile, and I think it's pretty clear that Sandsoft is starting with mobile. Jam City is only mobile. The new COO comes from a mobile background as well at Social Point. But to your point, I don't know if they're kind of going about it in the right way. Like if they do have this mission in 5 years to become like this huge player, can you really only start with mobile assets? Like it seems like a much clearer transition, like to go from console and then either acquire your way or develop your way into like mobile capabilities than the other way around, just because it is such a different user demographic.
Well, kind of like checking this company out, I kept getting reminded of Carry First. Like the more I read about it, I was more and more reminded of Carry First. And I mean, just as a reminder to listeners, but Carry First um, is is basically another mobile games publisher, but focused on Africa, and also seeing some good level of success. They've gone on to raise like over 50 million until like a Series B and such. If I might be wrong on those numbers, but yeah, definitely raised like some significant amount. But Carry First, like super secret weapon, I think, is essentially their localized payment rails platform. I forget what the exact name is, but for a region like Africa, which first of all is double the population of MENA, is, I mean, it things like credit card penetration and stuff is like super low over there. Yes, a lot of people have like mobile phones and they are like mobile savvy, but in terms of like actual localized payment options, those they exist, but it's not like fully integrated into the infrastructure. And Carry First has kind of built out their publishing value add with that in mind from day one. And therefore, like, there are lots of like parallels between Carry First and India, but I just don't see those parallels with Sandsoft, Mina, and and Carry First and Africa, for example. Like, the more I read, I just kept asking myself, like, what is the real value add that Sandsoft is kind of bringing to the table? Because um um I mean, first of all, like, the region is like half the size of in Africa. For two is, in terms of credit card penetration and stuff, the region is actually way ahead. So you know even if like they wanted to build out something similar like Carry First, there's the opportunity is quite limited because people are already kind of are able to pay. um Checking their current portfolio, the kinds of games, so I don't know, they currently have like these super random casual games that they are kind of publishing in Mina. But the games that actually work in that region are all mid-core. Like, if you just look at the top 25 games of the past 3 years, almost all of them are mid-core. The only ones that are not are Roblox, but that's a phenomena. And the others are like some very, very highly localized game concepts, similar to Teen Patti in India, which is basically India's version of poker. So like, these kinds of games are popular. So yeah, but their current portfolio is really not even reflecting what the MENA region even likes in terms of games. And yeah, I just kind of fully question like this whole, they make a statement about, we don't localize, we culturalize. And I was really questioning, like, okay, is is there really that much upside in culturalization for this region specifically? um even you just take the example of language diversity, it's nowhere close to an Africa in terms of language diversity. So yeah, I don't know, I just kept asking myself, like, what is the real value add that they're bringing to the table over here? Of course, like, they have like some understanding of the MENA region and such, and they might be able to help developers, I guess, enter that market. But
Yeah, from reading and from hearing you talk about it a little bit, like I was just thinking that one of the big pieces that both with Sandsoft and even Savvy, what it feels like is that they're doing the MENA, publishing, localization, culturalization, et cetera, more as a way to justify, the Saudi Arabia vision of having the industry, speak to their region. But really where the growth is and where they're going to see success. And you see it with like their vision is like, it's not, build this amazing community of gaming developers and players in the region, is compete with EA and Activision, which then what it says is like, okay, they're trying to use their deep pockets to get into the global market. It's more of getting into European, Asian, and North America markets, both from the development standpoint, but also the consumer standpoint. And they need to be able to secure that money. They need to have a push for also bringing the games to the MENA region, also bringing the development, some of the development funds to the MENA region. So I think it's kind of a way to justify, and this is just me from reading for both Sandsoft and Savvy and seeing the movement of their strategy, is it feels like it's them just trying to justify, okay, we have the Saudi Arabia money, we need to please that, like, one priority. But really where we're going to find growth is not here. Like, where we're actually going to be able to compete in a global stage is by going everywhere else.
yeah, I mean, I hope they like change the messaging on their website to that soon, because it's because right now like the MENA publisher for Carry First and being an Africa publisher, it just made way more sense to me because the revenue potential ceiling for that continent is much higher because that entire continent and the people of the continent are way earlier in their digitization journey. MENA doesn't feel like that. There might be like certain countries in the MENA region that are like that, especially maybe in North Africa. But yeah, the ceiling feels way lower, and therefore, Sandsoft being the MENA publisher, yeah, the value add was just not clear. But yeah, I mean, what Tammy also said made sense.
I guess we'll see. Like, there's a lot of money flowing into the MENA region, a lot of attempts to try and kind of grow that out. And I have a feeling either like we'll see, a few years from now, like, wow, that was so prescient. Like, you guys really blew up that region. Like, that was a great investment. Or it's like, well, that was a nice try. Like, everyone kind of wanted to get a piece of that potential pie, but it didn't really work out because that region didn't have the growth potential we thought it did. But we had the money at the time kind of story, it seems like. Obviously, like, hard to say, right? Because, you said there are some ceilings to that growth, but there also is like potential to an extent, but it's not like a US trying to get into the Chinese market kind of potential, I think. So we'll see. Hopefully, though, some money well spent regardless, because there seems to be a lot of it going on, whether it be in esports or games development in general, things like that. So hopefully a lot good comes out of it, but we'll see. Probably not for another year or two, at least, I would imagine, before like you start to see that working out or not. But I wanted to thank everyone for joining today. Like, some great topics. We had a lot of stuff to cover, and like it's only limited time to do it. So definitely like try and squeeze in some more good stuff next week as well. So thank you, listener, of course, for tuning in every week here, which you hopefully do. And we'll see you all next week.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.